this is my research design assignment. So, a research design is the structure of a study. The design of the research should deliver the right evidence to the research problem so that you can gain more credible results. After this is completed, you're gonna the research method is going to begin, which is the mechanics of the research, for instance, the sample involved. So, a case study is an in-depth contextual study. This means that it's usually in the context of a real-life situation. So, case studies can involve either one individual or a group. They can have narrative. It's a narrative account with possible measurements, so this means that the researcher explains their findings instead of manipulating them. So, an advantage, it's a detailed and realistic account, so this can provide us with a useful insight into the situation being studied, and then all the information can be analysed. However, as a disadvantage, you've got low reliability levels because you're going to have interviews. You're not going to be able to repeat them word for word, especially if it's unstructured or semi-structured. You're going to have subjective, it's going to be subjective, which means biased, because your body language as a researcher can give away hints about what you're feeling. So then the participant may change what they say to suit your body language. And also, you might take what they say in the wrong way. People can say things and it can have ambiguous meanings. You might not fully understand what I mean, and then it takes your whole study into a different direction. And you've also got distortion, which is basically you can't recall history accurately or 100% accurately, because that's just impossible. So, example, gymnasts. This is basically different gendered gymnasts that have been doing gymnastics for the same amount of years, but they've got different amounts of pressure from their family, the public, and their friends, and so it's really seeing where they are, if they're at the same level or not. So the research is gathered from a variety of sources in the case study. So for secondary data, you're gonna interview the parents about the gymnast child and their performance, their ability, and how much they pushed them to improve this. And then for your primary data, you're gonna interview the gymnasts about themselves. This is primary because you're getting it straight from the source. So after this, the data is then analysed and then evaluated. So what was done well, like was there high validity levels? Yes, you got it straight from the source. Were they lying? No, blah blah blah. Reliability levels, that's going to be low because it's an interview. Like I said, you're not going to be able to repeat it word for word, especially if it's unstructured. So you're just evaluating that and what you found in the study, and then there's going to be a conclusion about the results. So cross-sectional, this is observational. This means that the researcher observes the study without manipulating the environment, then they record the information. So data is collected from a cross-section of the population at one point in time, so this is known as a snapshot. So the advantage of this is variable comparison. This means that researchers can compare a variety of different variables, for instance, age, or gender, your income level, and disadvantage, there's no proof of cause and effect. So although your findings can suggest a cause and effect of the snapshot, it doesn't actually provide definite proof. So this is because you're looking at one moment in time. You're not looking at what happened before to cause this or what happened after because of this. So, for example, gymnasts is gymnastics competed at a competitive level with more younger or older people at a gymnastics club. So this data can easily be gathered. You just find out the ages of all the gymnasts in the gymnasium, and then you count to get your answer. But you're not gonna have a valid reason for why you got the result you did, that you're just going to know the facts. So, for instance, if a teacher was off and she cancelled the lesson for the younger kids, you're going to see that a much greater number of older gymnasts competing at the competitive level than younger. So, this needs to be taken into consideration when doing cross-sectional research design. You've got a longitudinal, so this is once again observational. But these observations are taken over a long period of time, so this could be years. There's developmental changes, so because it's over years, the researcher can detect developments and changes in the characteristics of the target population. So this can be applied to individuals and groups. So advantage, you're going to have a more detailed variable comparison than a cross-sectional study, and it can also help establish a sequence of events, but you cannot prove the cause, because even though the research design allows a more valid and rational cause, it just can't be proven. You still don't know why. The example then, so it's using the same example. The ages of the competitive gymnasts at one club can be recorded for a number of years to detect the changes in the amount of people competing at a competitive level. You're still not going to know why, but you're going to be able to detect the changes. So correlational. Correlation means association. So therefore, correlational research designs identifies variables and the relationship between them. You're going to have positive correlations, which is when both variables increase at the same time. You can have negative correlations, which is when one increases, the other decreases. And you're going to have no correlation, which is when there is no relationship between the variables at all. You can see the little diagrams in the side. They're expressed on a scattergram, those are scattergrams. So the correlation coefficient is written as an R value. So for instance, a perfect positive correlation would be R equals 1, as you can see at the top left hand side, and a strong positive correlation would be R equals 0.7, which you can see next to it. So you get the point. So no correlation is R equals 0, and a negative correlation is R equals -1. So advantage, lots of data from a variety of different participants you can do. You can have a wide range of variables and their interrelations, and that there's realistic data. So what I mean by realistic data is that unlike experimental data that I'm going to come to in a minute, the variables and the variable responses are natural because they haven't been produced in a laboratory. And disadvantage, there's no indication of causation because it's an observational study, so the researcher doesn't have control over how the variables interact. So for example, we're looking at elite gymnasts here. So in this instance, you're going to assume that the wider their thigh girth, the more muscle they have, because you have to be in quite good physical condition to be a gymnast. So by looking at this, then you should be able to think that the wider their thigh girth is, the more power they can produce when they jump. So this is going to have a positive correlation. So now we've got experiment research design. So this is an investigation when a hypothesis is scientifically tested. It uses independent variables and dependent variables, and this is important. Well, no, this is what is measured by the researcher. So the cause is the independent variable and the effect is the dependent variable. You'll go into you can do this in different environments. You've got the lab experiment. So this is conducted in a well-controlled environment, but it's not necessarily a lab. And because it's well-controlled, you're going to have accurate measurements. So the strength of this, it's easy to replicate a lab experiment as it's a standardized procedure, and you can establish the cause and effect relationship as variables are precisely controlled. Unfortunately, it's an unnatural setting, so it may produce unnatural behaviour, which is also known as low ecological validity. Therefore, it's not actually possible to generalise findings to a real life setting. And also, the researcher may give hints about what the task they're about to do, so the participants may change their characteristics to suit the task. So this is actually known as demand characteristics. So for example, a gymnastic performs multi-stage fitness test to measure VO2 max while the coach shouts motivational words to see if this will improve performance. So if this was done in a lab, the coach is the independent variable and all the other variables would be controlled, such as temperature and temperature of room. And this basically just means that the gymnasts will keep going due to the motivation of the coach and their ability and their will, nothing else. So you can have field experiments. So these are done in real life environments of the participants. The experimenter still manipulates the independent variable, but it's done in a real life setting, so extraneous variables aren't controlled. So this is a positive because it has a higher ecological validity than a lab setting because it's more likely to reflect a real life situation, and demand characteristics won't affect participants because they don't actually know they're being studied. So unfortunately, there's less control over extraneous variables, which could cause a bias with results, and it also makes it difficult for the researcher to replicate the study in the same way. So using the same example, if this test was done as a field experiment and taken outside whilst it was raining, this variable might cause the gymnast to drop out early because even though they physically don't need to, but they're just not enjoying their time, so they have no motivation to continue. You also got a natural experiment, so these are also conducted every day environments, but here the experimenter has no control over the independent variable as it occurs naturally in real life, so there's very high ecological validity and there's no demand characteristics, but this experiment might be more time consuming and expensive than lab experiments, and there's no control over the extraneous variables that might bias the results. So it's really difficult to replicate the study in exactly the same way. So you've got repeated design measures. This means that the same participants are used in each condition. You've got independent groups, which means different participants are used in each condition. And you've got matched pair design, which means each group of participants is matched carefully on all the variables considered that are relevant to the experiment.